also. Thank you, sir.
We means we Chennai people are living in danger. My hospital is very close to Rayapuram. The residence is in Tondayarpet, and we get a huge number of cases from this densely packed areas of North Chennai, on average of over 1,500 cases per day. There's a rapid increase in the number of cases for the past 3 months. When March 21st, the complete shutdown was announced, the number of cases were only 40 per day in Tamil Nadu. Now the number of cases has gone up to 2,000 per day. That shows the 50 times increase in the prevalence of dengue in Tamil Nadu. I believe that there is a localized community spread started occurring in Chennai in certain hubs. Still, people are blaming the New Delhi Jamaat and the Coimbatore market factors as the culprits for this huge pandemic which is happening now in the world as well as now in India as well as in Tamil Nadu. I took off from the hospital from March 21st and rejoined on May 5th after a lapse of almost about 43 days, and went only for 1 month for a few hours in the morning, and I had seen a huge number of COVID cases. If you look at the virus has got a very interesting, the outer coat which is fully covered by a spike protein. You can see the number of spikes of the virus, and which is embedded in the lipid membrane of the outer core. And inside that, you can see the RNA enclosed in the protein. This is RNA virus. And this virus has several features we may be able to target with the drugs to break it down and stop entering the cells. It's not possible now because these spike proteins are kept changing by the virus. We'll see what are the changes which is done now to this virus. This SARS-CoV-2 virus can be classified into many types: O, A2, A2A, A3, number A3I, B, B1 and B4. The O is the one which is the ancestral type that originated from Wuhan. Now the A3I mutation altered a component in the spike protein, making it more invasive and more virulent. This COVID A3I is found in about 41% of the genome sequenced in India. So there's a big threat, I think, is happening to the entire population, that we have been affected by a very virulent strain of the COVID virus. It's a pre-adapted virus. This virus is fully pre-adapted for human infection and has insertions in its protein sequence that have never been detected in the other viruses and contribute to its infectivity and the virulence and pathogenicity. The virus has a receptor binding domain specifically designed for the human angiotensin converting enzyme receptor, which are found in the lungs, kidneys, intestines, and blood vessels. As you can see, this is a cell. You can see the ACE2 receptor site. This virus nicely fit into the receptors. People who are taking AC inhibitors and ARBs have left a lot of these ACE2 receptors open. So the virus can very easily enter, theoretically, in patients who have been taking AC inhibitors or the ARBs. So this viral entry, replication is all because of the down regulation of the ACE2 receptors. The mode of transmission: this virus binds to the receptors in the upper respiratory tract, provides a perfect location for transmission by coughing and droplet infection. The oral and upper respiratory infections can lead to transmission to the lower respiratory tract to form pneumonia, ARDS, GI side effects, and a cascade of inflammation producing severe immunologic responses. When I started attending the hospital, I could see mostly the male dominance seen in the presentation, almost 60 to 40 or 70 to 30. Somebody asked me why the male dominance. I thought it's due to alcoholism, smoking, more common in men, more roaming and more exposure to the outer world, probably less discipline than the women folks. I saw the age group around about 50 and above. Common above the 60 years above is more common, but adolescence is not an exception. Uncommon in children. I did not see much of children suffering from the COVID virus. It affects all sectors. Poor, rich, middle class, doesn't spare anyone. But surprisingly, what I saw, the slum dwellers were plenty near Rayapuram, the Kasimedu. None of them had the virus infection. I don't know whether they developed immunity because they've been in a very poor health state, poor sanitary status. That's the typical slum in Kasimedu, near to a hospital, about 2 kilometers away. They are very densely packed things, narrow roads, and very fortunate that it is not infected like the Dharavi in Mumbai. Otherwise, this will take almost 10 to 20,000 lives every day. The risk groups, what I saw is uncontrolled diabetics, CKD, type 2 DM with CKD is a very good combination. Somebody has got renal compromise and type 2 diabetic. They are the people almost 100% getting affected with this virus, with even with a small exposure. Coronary disease, hypertension, cirrhosis is another risk factor, alcoholics, smokers, COPD and bronchial asthma, malignancy, and people who are on chemotherapy and dialysis. Obesity is an independent risk factor for the COVID virus, and abdominal obesity is a big risk. When they develop complications, the lung complaints goes off very fast. We had lost recently a young doctor who is very obese. His abdominal obesity, I think his name is Dr. Vinod, who passed away at the age of 30 due to this virus. How do they present in your clinic? These are the classical presentations. Loss of smell and taste about 20%. Fever, joint pain, throat pain about 20%. Disturbing nagging cough 20%. Shortness of breath on minimal exertion. Sir, suddenly when I start walking, I find that I become breathless. And the saturation will be always around 25, a little below 95. It's almost about 10%. And we also have a lot of cases getting with abdominal pain and severe diarrhea. So there have been wide-ranging clinical presentations such as loss of taste and smell, sore throat, dry cough, headache, severe gastrointestinal pain and diarrhea. The taste and smell receptors are mostly involved by the COVID virus. The atypical presentations, some people are very normal without any symptoms of COVID. We call them asymptomatic. Now they transmit the virus to the other people or they are not transmitting. I think there's a big controversy. WHO has published a paper day yesterday telling that the asymptomatic carriers do not spread the disease. Hypoglycemia with a profuse sweating, I saw in about 10 to 15 patients in a known diabetic. People fear that they have a heart attack and come to the hospital because such a profuse sweating was seen. Sudden onset of breathlessness, overnight, they become breathless with a saturation near 50. They are sure to die. These are the people who die before even reaching the hospital. But few come with a PSO2 ranging from 70 to 80 without any symptoms. They sit in the OP without any symptoms at all. No dyspnea, no breathlessness, no fever. Then later on we found that they're called happy hypoxics. Some people come with a very vague nuchal pain and myalgia like a viral fever. So the clinical clues in your chamber is somebody has got a CAD, diabetic, CKD with fever and sputum, PSO2 around 95, extremely tired looking. This one I admit and tell you that these people volunteers admission. Without you open your mouth, they say, sir, I want to get admitted. When a diabetic says such a statement, if a says such a statement, one should be careful that the patient may be suffering from a COVID virus. So sometimes it has presented in one case like a classical dengue to me, the severe polyarthralgia, fever, rash. Some people get hallucinations and severe insomnia, especially elderly guys. Sudden loss of appetite, sudden loss of weight, altered taste, shaking fever with chills like in malaria. And I also see 2 cases with watery stools like cholera. So you see, you can see protein manifestations of this virus in the presentations. Some of the tests will give a clue to the diagnosis, which I observed in my clinic before the COVID PCR. Simple blood test, reduced total count, reduced platelet count, the Ts will not be very much reduced, around about 4,000 to 5,000. Platelets around 70 to 80,000. There's a phenomenon of neutrophilia with the lymphopenia is seen. The NLR, the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio is more than 3. And the NLR also is a prognostic value. Actually, what is NLR? N divided by L into 3 is more than 3. For example, the total count is say 4,800. The neutrophils is 68. Lymphocyte is 18. So the NLR is equal to 68 by 18 multiplied by 3 is 3.7. So anything more than 3 is an important sign, simple and gives a very good clue to the prognosis. Those who have got NLR positive carry a bad prognosis. Some of the non-COVID tests which are in the hospitalized patients, the D-dimer levels rise very early, indicating a pro-thrombogenic tendency of this virus. Serum ferritin levels are increased before the patient develops the cytokine storm. Creatinine levels start rising. Even on admission, they have 1.4, 1.6. You can see the rise 1.8, 1.9, 2.2 like that. These people are going for an acute kidney injury. LFT will show marginal elevation of the SGOT, SCPT, almost 60, 70 like that. Urine shows marginal proteinuria, 30 to 100, suggesting that the virus started affecting the multi-organ dysfunction. X-ray chest will give a nice clue to the diagnosis. As in this patient, you see the picture of pneumonitis with fever. This lady who's a non-asthmatic, but she came with the severe symptoms of fever, myalgia. The right base and the retrocardiac space shows features of pneumonitis. Of course, this is a very classical dengue. You can see the basal and peripheral changes of the pneumonitis. It's a very florid case, quite advanced. The SpO2 was quite low. You can see the pneumonitis here, the basal pneumonitis. The CT chest is an important investigation and it gives a clue to even the COVID PCR is negative. You don't believe the COVID PCR negative if you see a picture like this, the ground glass of the appearance of the lung and the peripheral involvement. So picture like a hypersensitive pneumonia will give a clue that even the PCR is negative, the patient is suffering from COVID infection. This is one of the advanced cases of the ARDS. We can see the whole lung is transferred into a ground glass appearance. Now COVID clues, fever, cough with sputum, PS2 around 95, comfortable on lying more than sitting. The minute they lie down, they are more comfortable. X-ray chest basal changes, NLR more than 3, and of course confirmed by CT chest. These people, there is no need for the COVID PCR because COVID PCR is only positive in about 67%. Almost about 30% of the people, we miss the diagnosis if you go by only the RT-PCR. Now, how do you proceed? Symptoms-free, young, no comorbid isolation at home or hospital. This is a big debate. Government says keep on changing their opinion. Put them in the hospital, put them in the house. They don't require any medicines or maybe azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine. Mortality is nil in these cases. And also in patients who have very mild fever and throat pain, the virus disappears when they are young. In hospital course, this is a very important slide. The patients develop fever followed by cough, breathlessness on mild exertion on 5th to 6th day, sudden deterioration on day 8 or day 9, develop ARDS, and death by the 10th day. If they survive the initial 7 to 10 days time, most of the people will survive. Recovery time is the people with mild disease recover in about 2 weeks time. People with a severe or critical disease ventilated recover within 3 to 6 weeks time. Management of these patients, oxygen, oxygen, oxygen. If you don't have oxygen, you cannot save these people. We require more amount of oxygen, 5 to 15 liters per minute. Patient with dyspnea with SpO2 more less than 92 respond to prone ventilation, prone positioning. You can give oxygen when the patient is on prone positioning. Over 20% require high flow oxygen and less than 2% require ventilation. So there's no need for a real ventilator in many cases. If you have high flow oxygen supply, that is sufficient. What is high flow oxygen? High flow oxygen therapy is a form of respiratory support where oxygen, often in conjunction with the compressed air humidification, is delivered to a patient at the rate of flow higher than that delivered traditionally in the oxygen therapy. You can almost give 10 to 15 liters per minute. This is one of the machines what we have. This is the nasal cannula. This machine is put it on and the moisturizer humidifier. It gives a almost you can go up to 20 liters per minute. You can have this one. This is very useful in patients who have severe asthma as well as the COPD. Prone nasal O2 or prone ventilation. The prone positioning can improve oxygenation. Moving to several mechanisms that improve the ventilation perfusion ratio, in general, consequently causes a reduction in the physiological strength. These include increased lung volume, redistribution of the perfusion, recruitment of the dorsal lung regions, and a more homogeneous distribution of ventilation. So very successfully, you can put the patient like that and give oxygen, they'll improve. Treatment, available medications in uncomplicated COVID. These are the drugs which are now available in our hand. Azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, doxycycline, nitazoxanide. This is used in tapeworm infection. Oseltamivir, the anti-flu or Tamiflu. And we have a nice drug called the indomethacin, very time-tested drug, and methylprednisolone tablets. These are the drugs which are used in uncomplicated COVID or to begin in a patient who has been admitted with a COVID infection. All these drugs are in RCTs now. Azithromycin SCQS, azithromycin with the nitazoxanide, hydroxychloroquine with the ivermectin, all are in combinations. The current use is only empirical. Indomethacin, how is it effective in coronavirus? Is a potent inhibitor of coronavirus replication and has both antiviral and anti-inflammatory activity. Dose up to 25 to 50 milligrams twice daily. Some of my friends have given up to 150 milligrams. When they suspect the cytokine storm, the people start the patients on indomethacin. Some of the people respond beautifully with this drug. But what about the ibuprofen? Ibuprofen can aggravate COVID-19 infection because the ibuprofen boosts the ACE2 receptors, which facilitate and boost the COVID-19 infection. So please don't use ibuprofen in patients to whom you suspect the COVID infection. Ivermectin in COVID infection. Ivermectin is a potent inhibitor of COVID-19 in vitro. A single dose of ivermectin causes 5,000-fold reduction in 48 hours in cell culture. That's a beautiful message. Only thing, we don't have any data on the human beings, but when I use this drug, I find the patient symptomatically become better within 2 days' time. The dose is 12 to 18 milligrams for 3 days. Hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19, prophylaxis versus treatment. It inhibits the intracellular replication of the virus, increases the endosomal pH, and interferes with the glycosylation of the cellular receptor of the COVID virus. That's of the spike protein. The prophylaxis is weekly 400 milligrams up to about 78 weeks. Of course, for treatment, we give the drug 200 milligrams BD for 5 days. Azithromycin alters the intracellular pH of the various organelles and inhibits the intracellular viral replication, alter the glycosylation of the ACE2 receptors, combines very well with hydroxychloroquine. Only thing you have to watch for the QT prolongation, that's the issue in combination therapy. People who are already taking the teneligliptin, suppose you start giving these two combinations, they definitely will go for QT prolongation. So one caution should be there. When you admit a patient with diabetes, the severe COVID infections, we have to stop the patients from the SGLT2 inhibitors and metformin and shift them to mostly insulin. Nitazoxanide, very much used in US during this epidemic. Useful along with azithromycin. Dose is 5 milligrams twice daily. Useful drug in influenza, successful in the Middle East respiratory syndrome. It potentiates the production of the endogenous interferon alpha and beta. I used it in about few cases. I found it useful. The drugs which are useful in the complicated COVID infection, we have the low molecular weight heparin, aspirin, intravenous salmeterol, lopinavir and ritonavir combination, remdesivir, tocilizumab. This is a new kit which is the interleukin receptor antagonist in cytokine storm. We don't use nowadays the lopinavir and the ritonavir because the results are not very good, but rest of the other drugs are useful. Tocilizumab was available freely, but for the past 10 days, we have a difficulty in getting tocilizumab. Remdesivir, somebody is abroad, they get it in the black market, and corporate hospitals, somehow they have this remdesivir with them. Thrombosis in COVID-19, hypercoagulopathy is common complications of COVID-19. High circulating levels of fibrinogen have been linked to thrombosis. Hyperfibrinogenemia leads to macrothrombosis like pulmonary emboli. That's why the D dimer goes up very fast. Stroke, acute kidney injury, and renal infarcts. In such situation, we suspect the thrombosis in the D dimer levels are very high. In the severe COVID infections, we can treat them straight away with a low molecular weight heparin, and aspirin is very useful and saves the patient from thromboembolic complications of COVID. Sometimes people die through the complication, not through the lung. COVID is more than a lung disease. The role of steroids, low dose versus high dose. 60 milligrams BD IV is given for 5 days in early CT features of COVID. 500 milligrams to 1 gram IV BD is given in severe CT features with impending ARDS. I showed a CT report. The patient received almost three days the 2 grams daily. Patient improved. Presentation with the shock hypoxia ARDS, again indications for patients put them on high dose of the salmeterol. Remdesivir, not available in India. Intravenous remdesivir, the dose is 200 milligrams on day 1, followed by 100 milligrams on day 2 to 10 in a single daily infusions, which is mixed with about 100 ml of saline and given IV. It is contraindicated in multi-organ dysfunction. When the patient comes with a liver failure, renal failure, we can't give this drug. Very useful in very severe COVID infections. This drug but failed in the Ebola virus infection. This drug was considered to control the Ebola virus, but it failed, but it somehow succeeded in treating the COVID virus infections. Remdesivir was superior to placebo in shortening the time to recovery in adults hospitalized with COVID-19 and evidence of lower respiratory infection. That's by the May issue of the New England Journal of Medicine. Tocilizumab, a good drug. The pathogenic T cells and inflammatory monocytes incite inflammatory storm with large amount of interleukin-6. Therefore, the monoclonal antibodies that targets the IL-6 pathways may potentially curb the inflammatory storm. If you could block the IL-6, or if you could target the monoclonal antibodies or target the monocytes, we can treat this infection successfully. Moreover, tocilizumab treatment that blocking IL-6 receptors showed inspiring clinical results that include temperature return to normal quickly, respiratory function improved, and tocilizumab is an effective treatment in severe patients of COVID-19 to calm the inflammatory storm and to reduce the mortality. This is the picturesque effect of how tocilizumab is active. You can see here, the monocytes, the T cells and the monocytes. They become inflammatory, then they start secreting IL-6. That lead on to edema, exudate, inflammatory cellular response, cytokine storm, and it also affects the inflammatory macrophages. Such an action by the virus leads on to dreaded complications. The tocilizumab, as you can see at the brown bars, it actually blocks the IL-6 receptors here like that, so that it calms the inflammatory storm by this deadly virus. See, but for the first dose, the recommended dose is 400 milligrams, diluted about 100 ml with a 0.9 ml normal saline, and the infusion time is more than 1 hour. For patients with the poor initial efficacy, an additional application can be made after 12 hours. The dose is again 400 milligrams. So the maximum number of doses, times of administration is only 2. And the maximum dose of a single dose should not exceed more than 800. Beyond 800, we don't have much response to this drug. If the drug is going to be active, with the 400 milligrams, the response will be beautiful. Some of the doctors who have been surviving have received the tocilizumab and they survived. Very unfortunate that there's a scarcity of the drug now available in the market. My carry-on message for you is the wash your hands frequently, cough or sneeze with the flexed elbow, avoid touching your face, call your loved ones and friends, keep talking to them, what I am doing now for the past so many months. Eat a lot of vegetables and fruits, take high protein diet, spend time with your family members, be physically active, start doing exercises, stay positive. So I think That's the end of my lecture. Okay, give a little clue to the diagnosis, little non-COVID test to give the diagnosis and prognosis. And I also told you the drugs available for the early presentation and for the complicated cases. Again, thank you, the IMA Sivagasi and my Maple Shanmugarajan for giving me the opportunity to give my opinion on the COVID in North Chennai. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.